Good morning. Do you think we're honest enough about how we feel? I ask this for two reasons. The first is this week has been Children's Mental Health Week, hasn't it? And about halfway through the week, it occurred to me, how on earth are we going to help our children to have good mental health if we, as a society, as well as individuals, are not honest about our own reality, our own struggles, and indeed our own solutions? The second reason I ask the question is because if I'm honest, and they say it's the best policy, don't they? So we'll have a go at it. If I'm honest, this week, I've had an awful week emotionally. Various things have triggered emotions and stress and anxiety, and it has been really hard to deal with. At times, it's been really hard for Linda to deal with as well, but that's a whole different conversation. Now, in fairness, what I've gone through this week and what I've experienced this week, even in terms of what I've experienced before with my sort of mental health or my sense of well-being, it's not been extreme, not by any stretch of the imagination, because it is important that we recognize the complexity and the diverse range and spectrum of experience that people have when we talk about these sorts of things, isn't it? I mean, it's a bit like, I was thinking, what's it like? And I was thinking, it's a bit like, you know how you can get a cold, and a cold is real, and a cold has an impact on your life. But a cold is very different to having the flu. And some people get a cold, and some people get the flu. And the two are very, very different. And then, of course, some people get the flu, but then some people get that other virus whose name we shall not mention. And actually, the difference between having the flu and having that are very different as well, despite what we tried to tell ourselves a year ago. And it's really important that we don't overstate this one over here. It's really important that we don't overstate how bad that is, because if we do, the danger is that we undermine the significance of this one over here. But at the same time, it's really important that we don't say this one over here is the only really significant, important thing that demands our attention. Because if we do that, we ignore the impact of this one, and perhaps the growing impact of this one, and what it's doing to people's lives. So it's important we get the balance right, and we don't overstate it, and at the same time we don't understate the reality of what is happening to us. And of course, it's also important to note, I think, that some degree of stress, some degree of anxiety, as a lot of practitioners will tell us now, is actually good for us. It helps us keep our life focused. It helps us keep, an edge, stay sharp, etc., etc., etc. It's about balance, though, isn't it? And for me, one of the things that helps me stay most balanced in this is when I'm just honest with God about the reality of what I'm going through. But I'll be honest with you, this week, it has been a bit of a struggle. Now, I have known what to do, because when I was in therapy, I learned techniques that really do help me keep that balance and find that balance again. The thing is, sometimes it takes a few days before you start to apply them. Sometimes it takes longer than a few days. And sometimes they don't work first time around, or indeed second, or indeed third, if we're honest. And therein, for me, is the rub this week, if we're honest. Because I do think that often, especially in church, we are not honest about how we feel. We are not honest about the things that are impacting our minds. We are not honest about the struggles that we have. We either overstate them because we think that's the only way that people will care for us, or we play them down because we're afraid people will judge us. And you get the ridiculous situation, and we all know it's true, we all know that we've done it, where people say, "How are you?" And inside, our inside voice is saying, "I want to run down the road screaming." But what we actually say is, "I'm fine." because we're afraid that people will think if we're not fine, somehow we are not spiritual enough, that we are spiritual failures. So I would like to point out that this week, I've been fine this week. In fact, I go as far as to say spiritually, I've been great this week. I've been building up the walls. I've been remembering that before the foundation of the world, Christ died for me, etc., etc. But emotionally, I've had triggers that have just given me things to struggle with. And we need to be honest about this. We need to be upfront about it. Because the truth is, this can affect any of us. Struggles with our mental health, struggles with our sense of well-being, especially in all that we have carried over the last year. It can affect any of us. And we need to support one another into effective help wherever we are on the spectrum. And whether that help is simply a moment to pause and pray, or the arms of the person who loves you the most put round you, or techniques to help you cope with the things that are going on in your head, or therapy, or medication, whatever it is, we need to be there to be honest and to support one another into the most effective help that we can get, don't we? And to do that, we need to be honest. Because when we stop denying it, when we stop overplaying it, when we start to be honest about these things, it changes its power over us. It changes its hold over us. When we start to be honest about it, it changes the dynamic of how the struggles play out in our lives and in our mind. And it allows God to work. You can see that in 1 Kings 19, Elijah. Elijah had had a great day. The power of God was on him. He had called fire from heaven. And yet the next day, we find him sitting in the desert, ready to die, filled with fear and despair. It can happen that quickly. And sitting in a cave, finally, he is honest about how he feels. Sitting in a cave, finally, he expresses the heartfelt emotions that are playing through his head, and he recognizes the reality of what is going on in him. And what happens? God is able to meet him in the honesty of that cave. And God works in him, not through a mighty wind that just blows his troubles away. Sometimes we expect God just to blow our troubles away, don't we? Not through an earthquake that shakes the things that come against us so they fall down. Sometimes we do expect God to do walls of Jericho stuff for all our problems, don't we? Not with fire that burns up his insecurities and consumes them so that he emerges super Christian, absolutely perfect. No. God meets him in a still small voice to lead him forward. And when God meets us to lead us forward, it doesn't mean it gets better straight away. It doesn't even mean it gets better the next day, or necessarily the next, or the next. But when God meets us, he leads us forward. And the foundation for God meeting us in the reality of our need is honesty. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we need to tell everybody everything. No, we don't. Be select, be wise who we share with and what level of detail we share. But when we are honest with each other and with God, he is able to lead us forward to find a place of support and help and strength. And if you don't believe me, read 1 Kings 19, because having gone through that experience, Elijah finds Elisha, who stands alongside him and ministers to him. All too often, we're not honest about how we feel. Partly that's because we're British, dear boy. Partly that's because we kind of feel that people will judge us spiritually. The reality is, our emotions, our mental health, it's as complex as our physical health. And the two are intertwined. And when we start to be honest with each other and with God, He is able to lead us into a place where we find the support, the help, and the strength we need. 1 Kings, chapter 19. Let's pray. Help us, Lord, to see the truth, to recognize the reality of what is going on in us. Because it is not your desire that we should sit static in a place of struggle. It is your desire that we should meet with you, and through the love and the support and the provision that is around us, whatever form it might take, to move forward into a stronger place. It's important, Lord, for us to be honest about these things, because how will we encourage the next generation into a closer experience of your strengthening if we are not honest about our own experience? So help us to be honest with ourselves in an appropriate way with one another, but most of all with you, so that we might learn to grow and find in that still small voice the path forward, that we might flourish into who you would have us be. Amen.